Okay, so what I was saying just before the break is that all of these techniques for keeping jobs cheap produce what Marx calls alienation. What is alienation? Alienation, which doesn't necessarily come from capitalism, but it's interesting that it's one of the essential effects of capitalism, is when you spend your time doing a thing where that thing is separate from you. It's not any kind of expression of the self. It's whatever your activity is, that activity and its content belongs to somebody else, furthers somebody else's needs, furthers somebody else's vision, and is not an expression of you and you who you are. Now, actually, as a side point, and maybe we'll come back to this later, we've been talking about existentialism throughout this class, and we've been talking about the idea that your actions are you. So if your actions are you, if you who you are is really in your actions, then notice that if your actions belong to someone else, then that's a very deep kind of subjugation. There isn't some sort of pure inner self that still belongs to you. Alienation becomes a kind of a slavery, right? Where your whole self is co-opted by and belongs to someone else. But putting aside that extreme existentialist thesis for now, there's something fundamentally self-breaking about this severing between your actions and you, right? This idea that what you do is not under your control and is not expressing your vision, but is under somebody else's control and is expressing their vision. Now, why does capitalism produce alienation? Well, first of all, doing a job where what you are making is a product that someone else conceived of, that belongs to someone else, and that someone else will profit from and not you, is already alienating. But also, having your job become some small slice, right, where you're broken into such a small chunk that you're just a cog in a much larger machine, where your part of that machine is pretty meaningless, seems obviously alienating. If all you're doing all day is filing one kind of paper or checking the foil on the toothpaste tube, these are jobs that are too small and meaningless to really be an expression of anybody's selfhood. Okay, back to Bojack. So we see several really vivid, worked out examples of capitalist alienation in the first half of season 6. Right? Most obviously, we see White Whale buy out Krush and buy out the toy company. So Diane and the small business owners both have to start producing products to others' specifications instead of their own. These are really nice examples of alienation because both Diane and the owners of the company, I'm trying to remember the company's name now, Every Animal Girl or something like that. I'll find it. Yes, Every Animal Girl Company. That's it, right? So both the owners of the Every Animal Girl Company and Diane, before they get bought out, are spending their time doing something which is very directly an expression of themselves. Diane was writing stories about topics that she was passionate about that expressed her own emotions. And after she gets bought out by White Whale, she has topics assigned to her, and the emotions that she's asked to express are not her emotions, but emotions that further the profit of the company, right? Similarly, the owners of the Every Animal Girl Company have created this small company where there is no distinction between capitalists and wage laborers. They're doing everything themselves. And the company's products are a direct expression of their values. In this case, their values being feminism and environmentalism. After they get bought out, they turn from capitalists to wage laborers, right? Now they're working for somebody else and the vision is no longer their own. We also see a funny example of alienation when Todd hires 12 assistants to basically be Todds. The whole idea here is it's making the Marxist point about differentiated labor. He slices himself into 12 different slices, and each person he hires is functioning as a slice of him. But notice they're functioning as a slice of him, not as themselves, right? They're all supposed to be Todd slices. So it's making the point both about differentiated labor and about the displacement of labor, where your labor is not for yourself but for somebody else. When it comes to the assistants who end up going on strike, they're not allowed to have their own selves or their own needs at all, right? They're turned into mere objects or tools to express their employer's will. This is the entire reason why they go on strike. And I like including the organ bank in here too, right? This idea that parts of your own body might be commodified and literally alienated from you. So that, for example, Todd gets rid of his kidney, and now that kidney belongs to somebody else for his profit, and he cannot express himself and his own values by using his kidney for the person that he wants to use it for. It's out there and no longer under his control. Okay, so according to Marx, it's just built into capitalism that the interests of capital and of the capitalists, who are the ones producing capital, and the interests of the wage laborer are opposed, right? There's two basic classes of society for him, the capitalists and the wage laborers, and even if they intentionally mean one another well and want to get along, their interests are in tension with one another. It's in the interest of capitalists for the wage jobs to be as underpaid and boring and alienated as possible. And this is not about them being evil. This is built into the system. They have to profit off of their products or they're going to be driven out of business, and then they will cease to be capitalists and they'll have to go become wage laborers too, which incidentally will increase the supply of wage laborers and push the price of labor even farther down because of the law of supply and demand. Another nice example of this is just picking up on the last lecture, right, is that rehab uses addicts as its raw material and then profits off of them. And this fits into the model as well on the other end, right? It's not about producing cheap labor in this case, it's about producing raw materials. The rehab centers need a lot of addicts if they are going to profit. And if you can make repeat addicts out of the same person, then that's all the more efficient and all the cheaper. So capitalists also have interests directly opposed to their raw materials when the raw materials are people. Okay, Marx also points out if other companies, if other capitalists are getting more done for cheaper, if they have a better and broader differentiated labor system and can get cheaper raw resources and can profit more, then they're going to chase other capitalist competitors out of business. So it's also built into the system that the larger scale of the company, the more vertical integration and horizontal integration it can engage in, the bigger it can become and the more it can reduce its costs by differentiating labor more, the more it's going to succeed. And that means that because of competition, that kind of large scale is going to become non-optional. So Marx, although this often gets lost when people talk about him, Marx was all in favor of small-scale capitalism, where you had the capitalist and the laborers being one and the same person. There was no alienation. So he very much likes small businesses like the Every Animal Grow Company, where somebody has a vision, they make a product themselves that realizes that vision, and then they profit off of that vision. He was actually really in favor of that kind of capitalism. The problem was, he rightly thought that that kind of capitalism, unless we have laws in place protecting it, is going to cease to exist kind of automatically, because the large-scale, impersonal corporate capitalism that can do everything for cheaper is going to just beat it out for competition, right? We've seen this over and over again. We've seen small independent coffee shops lose out to Starbucks, small independent bookstores lose out to Amazon, and so on. And this is why. And what happens is when you've got a small company that's losing out to the large company by competition, it has two choices. Either it can let the large company eat it up and it can become part of the larger economy of scale, or it can close and the people who were in it now need work and become wage laborers, and this is going to push wage labor down. And this is the dynamic that we see in the show. So interestingly, I think the show, alongside all of its other existential themes, is maintaining this other theme that runs through several episodes about this critique of capitalism. And the reason I think the show cares about the critique of capitalism is because of this connection to alienation, which really is an existential issue. It's about a fundamental fragmentation in the self, which is a product of an economic arrangement. Okay, I will end this lecture here.